liberty in America is under assault. We no longer live in a reality that includes property rights. We're no longer the kings of our own castle. We no longer enjoy the true benefits of capitalism. Instead, we're negotiating our rights with our own government. This isn't how our country was founded. These aren't the ideas of our founders. It's time to seize back our country. This is the Liberty Hour, where these important issues will be discussed for the sake of America's future. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Constitution in the other, here's your host, Sean Thompson.
This is the Liberty Hour podcast. Each and every Tuesday at 9 a.m., actually 9:05. I can't, we got a little sound problem. All I hear is Dan Proft humming in my ear, apparently. We even whistled in the big dog because, listen, I was off a week. I was in the land of paradise, milk and honey, and you'd be surprised how many Illinois license plates you see in Southwest Florida. And one of the things, the reasons for that is the political climate, the futility in being an entrepreneur, the futility in striving for your property rights, in the assumption that $1 in your real estate is $1 out. Are you there, big guy? So at a certain point, you have to recognize this futility. And there's nothing more hopeless in a futile situation than an absence of an opportunity to change things. And every election cycle here in Illinois is supposed to be an option to change things, an opportunity to make things different. But it's not. It's not an opportunity. And what makes that more obvious is when we have a mayor's election. And when the mayor's election consists of 14 versions of the same philosophy, the same corruption, the same ideology, when you have no alternative but to lose in slow motion, you have a problem. Perfect. There we go. All right. Now we're talking, baby. God, I'm loud. That is the reality of the Chicago mayoral season, mayoral election. When you have alternatives that have not just, and I don't just mean to pick the low-hanging fruit, which is Bill Daley. Bill Daley is the easiest to discount, the easiest to discredit, the easiest to point out the corruption, open and notorious. And guess what? That's going to be your next mayor. It's going to be Bill Daley, whether you think it is or not. And if you're hedging, who are your other guys? Who are your other choices? 312-642-5600. Let me guess who they are, okay? They're going to be Gary Chico, right? Because he was the guy that should have beat the midget, Rahm Emanuel. Gary Chico is the one, and he's got all the nifty commercials. He's got all of the little – I worked here forever. In fact, do we have the commercials loaded? Hey, handsome in the other room. Do we have the commercials loaded that I sent or no? All right. I guess not. We have Gary Chico telling us how he's just a kid from around the block, right? He worked in his old man's auto parts store or mechanic shop, and he just managed to tough it out and became this monumental success because in the commercial, he wants you to believe he's an actual attorney, like so many of the non-corrupt ones. He wants you to believe he's an attorney litigating and lobbying for the laws of the individual, fighting for the small guy. He doesn't want you to know he is but a liaison of the corruption. In fact, that's who he is today. That's who he has been since he got out of college in the 80s. His first job, his very first job. Now, there's an article that you could find printed when he was running against Rahm Emanuel, and the corrupt powers that be preferred Rahm over Gary Chico. That's the last time any reporting was done. So I had to go back to the Reader, believe it or not, from 2011. The Reader from 2011, which goes over Gary Chico's long, tattered career, where we pretend that in this career, he just went to night school to become an attorney, and he thought he'd fight for the people. What they don't tell you is that as a senior in college, he wandered into an office during an election season for one of the most corrupt politicians in American history, who still thrives here in Chicago by the name of Ed Burke. Oh, and I know he's under a pretend indictment, but so what? For 50 years, he's been committing open and notorious political corruption, collusion, and fraud with kickbacks that those of us who earn a living can barely even imagine and will never really find out. Ed Burke, finally, after 50 years of true pay-to-play scheming, he is the architect, the schematic director of pay-to-play. He's now under investigation. Ooh. And what's going to happen after he's amassed $100+ million? Power to where a phone call from him is something that just, it casts fear among the most corrupt in Chicago. He is truly one of the dons, one of the leaders. And what's going to happen? Anybody want to bet? He won't do 24 months. If he does any, it'll be in some club fed where his Viagra doesn't work anyway. So he lived a life of crime and got away with it. And he built an infrastructure of foot soldiers like Gary Chico, because this is who Gary Chico is. And then I've heard through the waves of Chicago's conservatives, I guess, who talk about Paul Vallis. Paul Vallis. Guess who was appointed to the schools in the same manner Gary Chico was, from Daley? Appointed at the exact same time. Paul Vallis. Paul Vallis and Gary Chico come from the same tree of corruption, of Chicago malfeasance, of pay-to-play schemes so open and notorious, those businesses in Chicago just think it's the way things operate. They just think it's the way things operate to get shaken down by these aldermen. Their names are irrelevant and their names are fungible because it's the system that simply imports the employees of corruption we call representatives. And the idea that the Republican Party, which I have to tell you, I am so baffled. I am so in awe of the fact that the Republican Party realizes the crime, the corruption, the waste and the futility of trying to fight it, that they don't even run somebody. How could you not put up an alternative to these 14 slugs? Slugs. Now, here are who, as I was listening during this election season, which was exhausting, the one that where I said to myself, you have to be kidding me, was the brother of Daley, the son of arguably the most incompetent, corrupt, and successful at enriching not just himself, but building a crime mafia of employees and foot soldiers, one Bill Daley.
Buildings rise inside the loop, families are being driven out of our neighborhoods every day. Bill Daley has spent his whole life in Chicago. It's in his blood. He knows Chicago only thrives when all our 77 neighborhoods thrive. Bill will put a moratorium on tax hikes to keep families in their homes. And he'll make getting guns and gangs off our streets priority number one. Bill Daley for mayor. No more excuses.
Now, there's something to notice there. You didn't hear his voice. And it's not just because he sounds like a musketeer. Not a musketeer, a mouseketeer. He sounds like a mouseketeer. This is the voice of a guy. It's just pathetic. And it went through a month and a half before any investigation was exposed of exactly who he is. And it wasn't done by the media in Chicago. It wasn't even done by his other opponents. Although Lightfoot Thunderbolt mentioned it in passing. It was done by a small wing of a political organization, a PAC of conservatives. Not even the Republican Party ran it, where it exposed the fact that he's been nothing but a liaison to Chicago connections and the real true mafia, the Chicago Democrat Party. This is who he is. He's not a businessman, although he's headed up a bank, although he's sat in council of major financial institutions on Wall Street. They simply did what Ken Griffin does. They give money because they want an alleviation of extortion. Why do you think that Ken Griffin gives this guy money? The richest Republican in America. A guy who single-handedly can change the course of an election by supporting a Republican. All of a sudden gives millions of dollars, which to him is tip money, to Bill Daley. Do you think it's because he believes those ideas? No. What that is, without talking about it, is an admission that he's going to need a favor from an extortion racket like the Chicago Democrat Party, especially if he becomes mayor. That's what that payoff is. He doesn't believe in one idea that Bill Daley has. And I'll get to why that's sickening from a person like me who's a capitalist who believes in what a guy like Griffin does, who supports markets and speculation and investment. That's despicable. But it's not nearly as despicable as that moron who owns the Cubs, Ricketts. Ricketts, who also gave money, gives his name behind Daly. I've often thought to myself, how do you get here when so many citizens of Chicago are good people? How do you get here when so many of the citizens recognize it and would stand up to it if given the opportunity? It's not just me. There's hundreds of thousands of Chicagoans who, if given the chance, would spit in their faces, who, if given the chance, would speak truth to power. What's most disheartening is when rich men do it, when they bow knee. It shows you just how futile it is to promote liberty, to promote capitalism, to pretend we have a free system, when the reality is those who are most successful at it admit openly that it's corrupt and that they need their favoritism. That's what Ken Griffin does. What's the point of having all that money if you're nothing but a victim anyway? What's the point of Todd Ricketts owning the Cubs that he supposedly turned around? But I'll tell you how you know who these people are. This is how you know a guy like Ricketts, in particular, without his daddy, without him hitting the loin lottery, would be working a kiosk at Woodfield selling life insurance. That's all he'd be. Yet he manages to throw his father under the bus at every turn. Here's a billionaire who recognizes, listen, this son of a bitch is so corrupt, I'm going to have to pay him off. And that's the same thing with Ken Griffin. And I may be butchering his name, but it's irrelevant to me because it's less important today than it was before he bent knee. I don't understand the mindset of somebody who refuses to speak to this power. I don't understand the mindset of billionaires who say, I need their good graces because what good's the money if you can't use it to put up a fight? Is there any better money spent in litigating the power structure of this corruption? Because what happens is when you pay it, you embolden it, you strengthen it, you give it confidence to where Ed Burke can tool around the Viagra Triangle on Rush Street with his 2-bit hookers and his drinks, and he's acting like an actual man, to where Gary Chico can go on TV, tell you what a lawyer he is, instead of just somebody with a law license who gets to deliver the bags in the form of retainers. That's all these people are. That's why it's time to move. It's time to recognize when your only option is different versions of crime, of tyranny, of demigods. It's time to go. It's sad. Listen, it isn't easy. It isn't easy. I make it sound like it's easy. Oh, I just got back from Florida. It's insanely difficult. Half the time I'm staying in Hotel Tonight because I have to go to different parts of Florida to try to make $1, to try to pay for the costs, the onerous losses that I'm exposed to because I was foolish enough to buy real estate in Illinois. But it's time to recognize that. I recognized that 3 years ago. I stopped giving advice to my clients when they would come to me and say, I'd like to buy this property. I said, well, how much do you hate your money? Do you hate yourself? Why do you hate your work and your effort? Why do you hate the money it produces? Because these politicians, their names are fungible. Bill Daley, Gary Chico, Laura Lightfoot, the one that looks like Grady from Sanford and Son. It doesn't matter. They view your money as their revenue, and they tell you it. It's like Pritzker. They view your money, your business, your property as just theirs to not take or take. This isn't a country. This definitely isn't a state of individuals anymore. This is, you're going to pay homage to the corruption. Even if you're a Republican, even if you're a capitalist like Griffin, even if you're a guy who owns a multi-billion-dollar, international-known, world-known sports team, you'll pay up. Now, listen, I grew up in a neighborhood like the old-fashioned gangsters, but at least they punch you in the face. These are gangsters that don't have the courage to do that. So they write a law. They misuse the weight of government because they've completely and utterly corrupted it. And who's going to stop them? The state? You just stuck their fat sycophant in there as governor. Another Another self-righteous demigod who's never had a job and yet has all the answers. But it seems to me that all the answers stem from one vehicle, one perspective, and that is of absolute totalitarian power over your property. And the Republicans do what? Bill Brady, another trust fund winner, supposedly a Republican. Looks great, by the way. Bill, you're aging great. Like Vincent Price, you fat slob. You're another dummy. And you've been sitting there for years doing nothing. And they come to you for a pushback on the misuse and abuse of power of a government that says, I get to tell you what you pay your people. And your reply is what? Well, I don't think it's going to work. I don't support it. But he is the governor. See, and that brings me to the point of why you need to position yourself in different areas, because Illinois is now a European country inside America. And what we're seeing on a national level is that the Democrat Party has become socialist, unarguably. Their biggest popular, most likely to be nominees for president, all rabid socialists. And that is because the Republicans have allowed this to happen, because they've lost the fundamental argument, the fundamental position. In fact, they've lost their ideology of what is America. And what you see when you hear these people talk is that for society, abuses on the individual is allowed. And I have Gary Chico's commercial. Let's hear it, because I'm pretty certain. Where is here we go. I'm pretty certain he talks about how certain building owners in certain locations should have their property stripped away.
After school, I pumped gas right here at my dad's neighborhood repair shop. You could see the skyscrapers, but they were a whole world away. My family came here from Mexico, and we never wasted a dime. When I was president of CPS, we turned record deficits into a surplus, and we built new neighborhood schools. As chairman of the city colleges, I cut millions in waste, and we cut property taxes. As mayor, we'll invest in working families in our neighborhoods again.
All right, this isn't the one where he talks about how buildings in the loop should be paying their fair share. And this is something I want to talk about. Because, number one, he can come out and lie about his production as the CPS head. What he doesn't tell you is that at the time period he did it, real estate was in the midst of the explosion of the false manipulated bubble, that he took advantage of that, borrowed money on those properties, some cases sold them, leased them out, took that money, and they call that a surplus. He didn't actually run efficiently the school system. He was a happenstance victim of a very outrageously strong bubble. That's what Gary Chico did. That's what Paul Vallis did. They didn't really achieve anything. They cooked the books. And if you don't believe me, only one news station did an expose on it, and it's Channel 2 when Gary first announced.
Chicago mayoral candidate Gary Chico is largely basing his campaign on his performance at CPS and the city colleges, boasting about success there in his TV ads. But does Chico's record match his rhetoric? CBS 2 political reporter Derek Blakely fact-checks Chico's claims.
After school, I pumped gas right here at my dad's neighborhood repair shop.
In his campaign ads, Gary Chico portrays himself as a regular guy from the neighborhoods who'll protect Chicago's working families.
I'm not going to tax people out of this city. Others have a strong record of taxing people to the point where they can't take it anymore.
And Chico brags about the job he did on Chicago's school board.
When I was president of CPS, we turned record deficits into a surplus, and we built new neighborhood schools.
I'd say that's true. When Chico took over in 1995, CPS faced a $325 million deficit. Over his 6 years there, CPS submitted 6 straight balanced budgets, spending $2.6 billion to repair old schools and build new ones. But Chico doesn't say he did all that in partnership with another mayoral candidate, former school CEO Paul Vallis.
And he doesn't talk about the real estate value.
Chico's law firm during those years became the biggest lobbyist at City Hall.
What was it?
Growing from 18 clients to almost 200. Chico's campaign responded today. He has always been transparent about this, and his firm clearly states it right on his homepage. But Chico's law clients received almost $600 million in CPS business.
That's pay to play,
forcing
baby.
Chico to abstain on board votes involving his clients a whopping 400 times.
As chairman of the city colleges,
Jeez.
I cut millions in waste, and we cut property taxes.
I'd say that's partially true. Cutting waste is a subjective call, but records confirm Chico's board cut City College property taxes for 2 years running.
Using his law
As
firm.
for those conflict of interest accusations, Gary Chico says he never applied pressure for anyone at CPS to hire his clients. But those clients made plenty of money at CPS, and through his law firm, so did Chico. Reporting live in the newsroom, Derek Blakely, CBS 2 News. Robin, Erica?
Yeah, stay on top of it for us, Derek. Thanks.
So see, that's the get. Now, Derek can't come out and say this is the blueprint of political corruption. This is how it works. You leverage your position and your authority over city government in order to enrich private business that has exclusivity on that power, that has a direct line. If you're trying to create a monopoly, this is how you do it. Now, he has to share. He has to cut in Madigan's law firm. He has to cut in Burke's law firm. He has to cut in the other little sycophant corrupt law firms that are willing to donate to their candidates. It is a money laundering scheme. It's not an actual business. It's a front organization. And that's why they more than often man the actual most successful ones. That's why when their associates in their law firms pass away, they are able to bequeath to their heirs hundreds of millions of dollars. But yet none of them release any of their tax returns. None of them see what has Gary Chico made in this scheme. And that's what it is. It's not really a business. His law firm wouldn't have one of these if he wasn't politically connected since the 80s. Since the 80s. He was Burke's right-hand guy. Interwoven in the same mafia family agenda of any crime organization. They bring up through the legacy of their corruption. That's how they get to know who has omerta to the scheme and who doesn't. The only difference between the Chicago Democrats and the five families in New York is it's not about a ethnicity, it's about an ideology. Are you a Chicago Democrat? Now you are in the mafia. It's really that simple. And it's clearly open and notorious because LaShawn Ford is running. He might be the most laughable outsider embraced by the Republicans in Illinois, in Chicagoland. Because this guy, who I've met, had a cigar with LaShawn Ford. And he had his big bouncer with him, big bodyguard. And I had no idea who he was until he left. None. It wasn't until after he left that the 18-count indictment came out for bank fraud. He wanted to talk to me about real estate and about what I thought about multifamilies in ghettos, at which point I said, there's a reason it's a ghetto. There's a reason that to have people come in and invest, they have to be paid by the government. It's a government-created ghetto. So government certainly cannot help it not be a ghetto. I gave him the exact advice I give everybody. Stay away unless you hate your money or you're in on the corruption. If you're a Daley cousin, brother, you're licking your chops right now because either your direct relative is going to be in charge of the purse or somebody who owes them everything is. And that's why you have 14 candidates with the exact same ideology. And I know we're going to get the calls every time. Willie Wilson. Willie Wilson. Oh, he wants to open up Meigs Field. Do you listen to what he talks about with other things? And this is when Republicans lose the argument. This is how we've lost the argument. This is how you can tell. Because we don't know what America is anymore. We don't know what our vision is, what our fundamentals are, what our principle is. We're all different versions of social engineering. And I have to say, as I'm listening to them, the 14, as I've listened to the Democrat national candidates come in, you realize this is the true face of racism. This is the true face of bigotry, of hatred. The only difference is they have this imaginary society they keep talking about. And I can't figure out who's in the society. Is it all? Is society something we're all in? Or is it something just the favorites of the politician, of the demigods are? What is society? See, because I remember being fascinated with John Locke with the Montesquieu and the Enlightenment. I remember being fascinated and in awe of what America is, how it's about the individual, how it recognizes the fact there's no real society. Society is just a weapon used by politicians. We're just individuals. There's no real society. As if we wouldn't get along without these idiots, as if we wouldn't collaborate. That's moronic. It's stupid. It's a denial of history. That ironically, the only real time that we have massive, massive conflicts is when governments have massive, massive conflicts. Individuals can only have conflicts one at a time. Governments can have them millions at a time. And it always happens when there's a government that pretends to represent a more virtuous society than the other, without recognizing those are often the most corrupt governments. In fact, there is no more corrupt government than the one that claims to represent the society of the poor people. That's the Chicago Democrat. Listen to the speech. Listen to what their verbiage is. They're always representing the least among us in the most ideological hope and virtue. But yet, what is the result? Absolute and total corruption. Because that's what it is. They really don't care about the kids. In fact, on one hand, they want to tell you how they're going to seize everyone's money to educate them, and simultaneously, they're going to seize your money to kill them. Does anybody think that's insane? Talk about conflicting principles. Which is it, stupid? Do you love the kids or do you hate them? Or do you just get to decide because you're a politician? You're an alderman. It's the joke of all jokes. And it must just be something in our DNA where we long to be slaves. We long to be accepted by the corrupt. Or we just think we're going to get cut in on it. Why? Because you get a job? Because your cousin's got a job? And this is what you come to realize as a Chicagoan, as someone from Illinois. It can't be stopped. It can't be beat. Because what I'm saying today is what people said 30 years ago. It's obvious what this is. There is no rebuttal to it. And my proof to it is, where is the opposition candidate to the corruption? They all say they're not part of the machine, but they're lying. Each and every 14 of them is part of the machine. Even Willie Wilson is part of the machine. And I guarantee you, if you go down the history of who he is, you will see an interwoven payoff to an alderman, acceptance of the corruption. And that's why it should be rejected when we see guys like Ken Griffin and that moron Ricketts, that greasy slob. I wouldn't even buy life insurance. Would you, Verlon, on the South Side? Would you buy life insurance from Ricketts?
How's it going, Sean?
Wonderful.
Well,
how are you?
I just wanted to tell you, since I'm an honorary Whitey, I voted Whiteys for Willie. I just got out of the polling booth. It doesn't look too good for voting this year. It was virtually empty. You know, I was like me and two other voters, so I hope it picks up before later on tonight. I really called you to ask you a question.
All right, go ahead, and then I'm going to ask you one. Go ahead.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back to make you leave so soon? Because last time I talked to you, it was like within 2 to 3 to maybe 4 years. Now it's like a couple of months.
Yeah,
What's going on, man?
It was watching Republicans actively support the Democrat, both the corrupt and incompetent and lying Congress people in Sean Casten and in Underwood. And it was this insanity of Republicans, rather than just simply rejecting the Republican, but supporting the Democrats. So you know me for years. I have never voted for someone I didn't agree with. I simply go in and I file a blank ballot, because that, to me, is what a moral opposition does. You don't pick the cleaner piece of shit or the lesser of two evils, right? And that's when you hear someone sell you a binary choice. That's what they're talking about. See, and nothing changes if you do that. The greatest thing that can send a shiver up the leg of a corrupt politician is when he knows you know what he is. That's why I love to go to events in my neighborhood, and I see that fraud, that walking punchline, Pete Silvestri. I just went to a boxing thing in Elmwood Park, right? And they got the scumbags up there, the state reps, and the Cook County commissioner, who simultaneously with claiming to be a Republican, colluded and runs one of these phony baloney law firms that negotiates advertising for the CTA. He also is an agent for Gold Rush Gaming, and he's a Cook County commissioner. Now, you're not a man. You're a scumbag. And I don't mind being around gangsters. Believe me, Verlon, I like it because a fight could always break out. But when you're around these sissy gangsters, these politicians, they look like dogs that were beat when you're in the room. They hover around the corners of the room and they refuse to look you in the eye. Because you know what? Pride, they can't take from me. You can take my money. You've done it. You can tax it. You can abuse me. You can come up and destroy property I invest in. But you can never take my dignity. You can never take my pride. And the only time that can happen is when you give it away. And Illinois Republicans, they don't even pretend they have it. They just give it away. I listened to some idiot talk about how rightfully he should have rejected Peter Roskam. Peter Roskam was a fraud and a con man and a hood ornament to corruption. But you don't vote for Sean Casten, whatever. You take your ballot and you file it blank. Because now they know you showed up and you refused to accept their two choices of corruption. They're cleaner piece of shit. I love having a podcast. I could say that. They realize you know what they are. Gary Chico, Rahm Emanuel, Bill Daley. Their biggest fear isn't this election. It's that when they go out, when they walk in offices, people say, you're nothing. And I won't give you the money. That's why it breaks my heart when Ken Griffin, you gave this scum, this fraud, $2 million, who has used his political power to extort companies. AT&T phone deal, the cellular deal, the investment bank on Wall Street. He couldn't get in the room. He couldn't be a bathroom attendant in these places. Yet he walks in as CEO. Why? Because his father's a gangster. That's why. And these businessmen, these so-called honest businessmen, they're just as sick. They want in on the scheme. They love the corruption, and they hope to be a favorite of it. That's why Griffin gave him the money. And as for Ricketts, he's half a man anyway. He's a scumbag. Did you hear how he threw his father under the bus? Because they hacked his emails, and he said that Muslims are creating war, whatever he said. That's your father. The only reason you are who you are is him. You could say, I don't agree with him, he's an old man. But he threw him under the bus like he was a kook. This man, Ricketts' father, was such a genius, so ahead of his time. He saw the future of where stock trading was and wanted to bring it into your house. He didn't want you to go through that corrupt broker system where they were charging you exorbitant rates. He said, what the hell is going on? I can make 5 times the money by being an honest businessman. And he did. And now his 2-bit son, who you'd never know his name, that greasy scumbag. Would you ever buy anything from him? Look at him. He's ugh. Let alone you get to throw your father under the bus and you give Daley millions. You're a scumbag, Ricketts. Another reason I'll never watch those fruits running around in their costumes hitting a ball. It's sickening to me. But anyway, I want to ask you a question because you said something that's interesting to me when you first called up. I'm part of the white guy. I get to talk to you because this is how I am. This is who I talk to everybody. You said I'm part of the white guy because I voted for Willie. Isn't it sad that we have allowed the party of true racism in the Socialist Party to seize the mantle of supposedly representing the black man? You know, I'm blessed in life. I judge people by who they are. So when I went to high school, I didn't like the trust fund kids from Hinsdale who were doing the blow in the bathroom. I pelled around with the other guys who happened to be there on the scholarships from Maywood and from the west side of Chicago. So my friends were Tony Freeman, Billy Stanback, Devin Cobb. These were my guys. So I still, once in a while, will communicate with them. And guess what? They happen to be black. And not a one of them is for any of the social engineering communist agenda of the Democrat. Not one of them. Not one of them is even for abortion. In fact, I've got 2 or 3 guys I went to school with who are reverends today. And I go through the, I don't know how many. I don't keep track, but I go through the friends in my life who are minorities. I don't know one of them who's a socialist. In fact, the only socialists I really know are the ones who, when they're alone, disparage the minorities. The only true Democrats I know are the true in their blood racists. And they look at people differently. They just feel that they have the ability to be a lord over rights rather than recognizing what made this country, what freed the slaves, was the recognition that we are individuals. And nobody gets to run an individual's life. Nobody gets to rule over them. But look what's happened over these 400 years. I guess you do if you're a politician. Now you do. Now you get to pick winners and losers when it comes to kids based on nothing. And the reality is, as you watch the news, the minorities really don't win in Chicago. In fact, they're victims. The minorities they're living in torturous circumstances. Watch the news, and I don't even care if it's that new news. The groovy one on 183 on Comcast. I don't know what it's called. The U, and they have the kids.
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's fun. At least there the hosts are young. I don't have to look at these weathered old hags on my HD TV. They pull out some young ones. They look, messed and disorientated, but they're just as stupid as the old ones. So, I like a little eye candy here and there. That's just me. But they parade down the news and they go through the stories. Who's killing each other? Who's the victims of this incompetence, of this corruption? The minority. And what's the minority's answer? They keep giving power to the same people that hurt them. It's almost laughable. If it wasn't so sad, you'd laugh. So when you ask me what's the straw that broke the camel's back, the reality is at a certain point you have to recognize futility. It is futile to be a person who is not a socialist and live in Illinois. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. If you're a socialist, this is the greatest state in the world. If you're a corrupt, in the clout-ridden mafia called the Chicago Democrat Party, why would you live anywhere else? Look at them. Look at Gary Chico. The guy's, what's his net worth? Does anybody know? It's probably a hair under the scumbag. Of course you don't. They're worth hundreds of millions. And yet Willie Wilson's the rich guy in the race. Oh, really? I got $1 to a donut says he's among the poorest in the race. The only difference is he had to make his money honestly. And that's harder. It's more in the light. It's more counted. It's more taxed. These scumbags, they're sacks that aren't taxed. They're brown paper bags. How much money do you think Burke's got in his safe? Please. You think he's worried about an indictment? He's 1,000 years old. His pecker hasn't worked for 15 years. What the hell's he got to lose? Joke. You get him. He's scammed the people for hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you got the other yard gnome, Madigan. Where's he going to go? And Rahm Emanuel, he's going to prance off to wherever. He'll be on MSNBC, and he'll be a voice of reason, like that other midget dwarf, George Stephanopoulos. And look at the other guy, who's a well-known corrupt scumbag who was paying his wife from a campaign $450,000 a year, Louis Gutierrez, my congressman. He's got an oceanside mansion in Puerto Rico, another corrupt bastion of Democrat ideology. And he's going to retire like he's an actual man, like he did something with his life, like he's me or he's you. That's the part I'm getting disgusted with. They get to prance around. They don't have to worry about things the way you and I do. The 1st of the month, the 15th of the month, the kids got to go here. They don't think like that because they've been stealing for decades. And yet they're going to run as you represent. You represent the poor man. And this scumbag, Gary Chico, he's been extorting these building owners in the loop to use his law firm to get their taxes lowered. And he's got the balls to now say they're going to pay their fair share. Well, who? The ones who paid you or the ones who just paid everybody else? Now he's going to double-cross them on the scam. It's a real joke, brother. It's a real joke. And I'm getting sick of it. But here's the good news. In Florida, it's different. You know why? They're old. They're crotchety. They've seen it, and they don't tolerate it. They really don't. There's two communities where the corruption exists, Broward and Miami-Dade. And Broward County and Miami-Dade County are laughed at by the rest of Florida the way Illinois is laughed at by the rest of the country. And the other thing is the people in power know this. So they now have safety nets in place. Right now, they've got agents working in there. They know what's going on. That's how come DeSantis not only won, but DeSantis won 18% of the black female vote. Did you know that?
They didn't report that in the media.
DeSantis won 18% of the black female vote, the mothers. That's who won, made sure he won the governorship. And the reason is because they recognize this is the guy that really looks out. We are the party that really looks out for your kids because we want to give them freedom of choice. Yet look at these 14 mayoral candidates. They're all talking about putting them in the prisons of the ghetto they built. prisons of the ghetto. Because you know what? They're the dummies that vote for Pritzker. The dummies. Pritzker ran the bank that raped the black community. Raped them. And they all voted for Pritzker.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know why? Stupidity pays.
I was one of the most outspoken people against Pritzker, but it didn't matter. They all ganged up on me and then put me down and called me all kinds of names and voted that man in.
That's why I'm proud of you, because I know you, and I know you're on the short ticket too. You'll be out of here right behind me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is probably going to be my last vote in Chicago, Illinois, and then the rest of my votes are going to be in Indiana.
And that's what we can do, because you know what? We're free men in exile. We're not really moving because we want to. We're moving because we have to. We're in exile. I'm in exile. I leave my family behind. I got to go back and forth like some moron, constantly flying, exhausted. That's okay, because I'm going to protect me, and I'm going to protect what's mine in the future and for my kids. What are you going to do, turn over a loss to your kids? Well, you know, I stayed close to Nana and Papa, so here you go. I know I lost $300,000 in the properties we bought and the fact that we redid it and the insane taxes that I never sent you to public school for. I know I got double screwed because of I don't want to be paid to be a sloth, and I was too proud to sell out. Because here's the other thing. How do you think, you don't think I knew the right guys to create a company, a front, whether it was an electrical company, a building cleaning company, an excavation company? You don't think if I was willing to drop off the envelope, I could have been a fireman? Come on. I was in on the same bullshit. I know how it works. All of a sudden, you're going to use these people to strip away the wealth of the people who will never get those contracts? They're never going to get that deal. Yet we are enslaved to the corrupt. That's the opposite of America. That's the opposite of my rights, I'm guaranteed. I have had politician after politician, and even those who raise money. Well, it's in the Constitution. You cannot create a law that enslaves me to another man. It's an unjust law at best. So you could take your Illinois Constitution, you don't even fold it. I want you to just keep it nice and crumply and shove it in your ass, because I don't care what it says. You don't get to beat me over the head with it. And then I had Sean Castan's father was doing it. Well, I think the people without these pensions, they're jealous. Jealous? I'm the only man. Every one of them sold out. They don't even know what a pension is. They don't even care that it's a Ponzi scheme. It's a crime commitment. It's an organ. From the time it was created, the scumbags who sold it and were paid very highly to sell it knew that it was a mathematical impossibility. They knew that it was a Ponzi scheme. But they also knew that it was the gateway to true payoff and true corruption in these agreements that are criminal. It's not really a pension. It has nothing to do with the return on investment. And by the way, Gary Chico, he diverted the money that it was supposed to go to the teachers' retirement fund. Did you know that? Him and
No.
Paul Vallis, when they were in control of the schools, under him, they passed the law where that money could go to the general fund. This scumbag is the one that bankrupted the teachers' pension system further. It was always bankrupt from the time it was agreed upon. But he's the one who actually directed the money to go into the general fund to pay for the scum. Him and Paul Vallis. And this is in this article, by the way, dated 2011 in the Reader. Look it up. Google it. It's for everyone to see. And this scumbag comes on conservative talk radio and talks about what a fiscal conservative and what a success he is as a human being. You're a scumbag. At least my gangsters will kick your teeth in. They'll beat the shit out of you. Gary Chico couldn't even win a fist fight, let alone he's the most successful gangster on the planet. It's sickening to me. Sickening. It really is. All right, but thank you for letting me vent. I feel much better. Thank you, Verlon.
Sean,
yeah, brother.
Sean, you got to let us give you this send-off party one of these weeks in March. I got to look back on Twitter and see the date that I think the Amish locked down. But you got to let us give it to you.
I'll give you a little inside baseball. You know, I got two daughters. I got one that my little one, the older one, she's kind of, she's at that age where she could care less. But the little one, she's upset. She's upset, man. So I'm dragging my feet. I'm dragging her down there. I'm going to always be coming back, a couple days a week. But it's heartbreaking, man. It's heartbreaking. But I explained to her. I talked to her the way I talked to you. I always did. I always talk to my kids like that. I don't let them, because I was worried about what would happen to kids. I saw how they were trying to imprint children with this demigod mentality. It's very strategic. It's all the way from the way they make them compete to the things that they teach them about school. They want them to feel that they are arbiters of rights. That's how you build a socialist society. So I always talk to my kids like that. I said, listen, I don't want to leave either. I don't want to leave Nana and Papa. I love them. My in-laws are the greatest people on the planet. I don't want it to be torn away from my brother-in-laws. They're like my brothers. But I tell her, I don't want to say her name, but I tell her, listen, I'm doing this for you in the future because I have to go do the best I can for you. I can't just sit here and be a victim and complain about it on morning shows by calling in the radio. I got to actually take my own advice. And it's heart-wrenching. I see other people that are in the same predicament I am. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to grab my ankles and get raped by these scumbags. I'm not going to do it. And look what they did with the business, Verlon. You realize that this guy can now tell you, I don't give a shit that you worry and you struggle and you mop the floors and you clean the toilets. When it comes to your negotiations with your employees, I do it. Are you out of your mind? That's Nazi shit. That's Nazi shit. This minimum wage increase. That's Nazism. So, here, I don't have employees. I refuse to have them. And no one's going to take my advice. Just shut the frickin' door. Shut the goddamn door. What are you going to do, lose a few sales? So what? You're going to lose the money anyway. You might as well lose it up front, short money. And that's what I've decided to do. I got four guys looking at the place. I don't even care. Verlon, I don't even care. I'll shut the goddamn door. Anyway, so you better make it fast,
All
kid.
right now.
All right, take care of yourself.
Take it easy, brother.
All right, goodbye. Because that's the reality. The country's lost its way. The Republican Party lost its soul. This isn't about an argument over the freedom of the individual, about Americanism. This is an argument about different versions of socialism that you're willing to swallow. As you can tell, I'm not going to do it quietly. And here's the beauty of podcasts. Here's kind of the long ball thinking. I can do this from anywhere. And I'm going to do it from anywhere. I'm going to do it. It's difficult sometimes. It takes away from my regular job, but so what? It's important. If it makes one person think, it makes one person question, makes one person aware. This stuff that I'm giving you, I'm not struck down by a deity and given this info. This is on the internet. I just happen to like to read once in a blue moon about these scumbags. On the Reader, 2011. Read about who Gary Chico and Paul Vallis are. They're the reasons the pension system for the Chicago public school system are as bad as it is. It was always going to be bad. But they love it. They wallow in this corruption like a pig in slop. Gary Chico's become a very rich man without any competition because he's a very good bag man. He's a very good foot soldier to Chicago Mafia Democrat corruption. He's only second to Bill Daley, and that's who's going to be 1 and 2. Mark my words. One of these two scums are going to be the next Chicago mayor. And you want to know the reality? It doesn't make that big of a difference because the last 4 you've had in there are the same scum. All right. It's hard to leave on an up note after that, kid. We've had a problem with our board, so I don't have the music to go out. But I would like to tell you how much I appreciate you listening. We've had some technical difficulties today. The morning show had a remote broadcast that kind of threw things up a little bit. And what happens during that is that my board gets lost. We had a blackout. But this all went, I don't know. I didn't think it was terrible. Tomorrow we will be back, and it will be working. I'm trying to look for, look at this. Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm trying to look for the Liberty Hour, and I still can't find the damn music. But you get it. Hum it to yourself. All right, we'll be back tomorrow, 9:05. Thank you so much for tuning in.